Hi, boys and girls. It's Mr. Wasemann, and today we are going to look at composing a paragraph that will be the introduction to our famous Hoosier biography. I'm in my slideshow that I've made a copy of, and I want to first go back to my instruction slide because I want to remind you about what our goal is. Okay. We're going to write our biography in complete sentences, and the bullet point reminders are for reference only. Now, I wanted to draw your attention to that fact because you're going to see some bullet points on each slide. And these are just reminders about what content needs to go on these slides. Now, you'll notice that in the introduction slide, there are two questions. Why is your famous Hoosier famous? And why is your famous Hoosier an important historical figure? Now, those two questions mimic the same two questions in my graphic organizer. And you will notice as you start to draft your biography that the graphic organizer follows the same sequence as your slideshow. So right after the introduction, you're going to see questions about your famous Hoosier's beginning and then claim to fame and so forth. Right now, we're just going to focus on the introduction. Okay, so two questions. Why is the famous Hoosier famous? And why is that famous Hoosier an important historical figure? Now, to answer these questions, I'm going to refer to a strategy entitled R.A.C.E. Now, R.A.C.E. is an acronym that stands for restate the question, answer the question, cite the source, and explain. For our purposes today, we are going to focus on these first two letters, R and A, restate the question. So I'm going to restate or reword the question and turn it into a statement. Okay, so my first question is, why is my famous Hoosier famous? So I'm going to open up that text box, and immediately what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cursor and I'm going to put it in front of the word text, and I'm just going to hit enter. Now, eventually I'm going to delete this, but I'm going to keep this in place for now just to remind me what needs to go in this box. Now, the text size of my text is as big as my word text down here, and that's a little bigger than what I want for my content. So I'm just going to change it to, say, 14. And I'm going to start by rephrasing the question. Why is my famous Hoosier famous? Okay, so I'm going to say my famous Hoosier is famous because, but I'm not going to say famous Hoosier. I'm going to use his name, Steve McQueen. So Steve McQueen is a famous Hoosier because. Now that is the first half of my statement. Now I go to the second part. Answer the question. What's being asked? Answer all parts of the question. Okay, so why is he famous? Well, he was a popular actor in the 60s and 70s. So I'm going to use this information to finish my sentence. Steve McQueen is a famous Hoosier because he was a popular film and television. Oops. Mr. Waseman's not the best typist. He was a popular film and television actor in the 1960s and 1970s. Now, I rephrased a couple parts of my sentence. It's not exactly what I wrote down in my notes, and that's okay. As you go from notes to drafting sentences, you might reword or rephrase things in ways to make your writing flow a little better. Now I have to answer the second question. Why is my famous Hoosier an important historical figure? Well, I go back to my notes. He starred in TV shows like Wanted, Dead or Alive and movies like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and Bullitt. Now, in my graphic organizer, it was not necessary for me to write sentences. In many places, I just wrote words and phrases or just facts. Like, for example, how many brothers and sisters he had? I just wrote the word none. However, I wrote a complete sentence here. And since this is a digital copy, I can do a little bit of copying and pasting to save myself from typing because, like I said, not the best typist. So I'm going to hit Control-C. That will copy the text in my graphic organizer. And I'm just going to plop it down on my slide right after my first sentence. Now, the text does not match, so I need to fix that. So I have the same font style, Century Gothic, but it's the wrong size, so I need to make it a little bit bigger. I got to take it off bold and italics. I'm going to change the color to white. So now let's reread what I've written. Steve McQueen is a famous Hoosier because he was a popular film and television actor in the 1960s and 1970s. He starred in TV shows like Wanted Dead or Alive and movies like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, and Bullet. And there you go. I've answered my 2 questions. So now what I can do is I can delete these bullet points. And that's all I have to write for this introduction. And I'm ready to move on to the next step. Now, again, as a reminder, these slides have spaces for pictures. We are not going to worry about pictures until the end of our draft. That means I'm going to move on to the next slide and continue drafting my text. I will worry about pictures and text features after all the writing is done. Okay? And that is how we write our introduction. We're going to use the RACE strategy to restate the questions that are the bullet points and phrase them into statements, answer the question, and then explain our response. Okay, now we're not going to be really citing text sources right now because a lot of what we're researching is going to be online. We'll talk about references at a later date. But for our purposes here, we need to make sure we are restating our question, answering the question, and explaining our answer, which we did in my draft. All right, until we talk again, have a good day and happy writing.